This request came in by email, and it's one I really appreciated because this person sent me a photograph to show me what she was talking about. So a lot of times when you make a request, if you just name something, it's a little difficult to know exactly what you mean. So I really appreciated that. Anyway, here's what she says. I really would love how to paint a snow-covered mountain. And then she goes ahead to explain how she recently moved to this mountainous area, which happens to be our area, and visited Brasstown Ball, which happens to be near here. And she says the sky was bright blue. Well, she sent me the photographs to show me what she meant. And the trees on the mountain from the parking lot were spectacular because they were encased in ice, making the mountain white. So it's really more ice covered than snow covered, but it works pretty much the same way. And she says, not sure how to capture this with paint. I'm going to show you how to figure that one out. Nothing you see should be a puzzle if you know how to go about figuring out what's there and then what to do about it. And so let's look at what is really there. What are we looking at? It's not just a snow-covered mountain against a clear sky, but it's made of elements that work together to make it appear the way it does before our eyes. And as painters, what we do is we look beyond what it is and look at what's making it look the way it does. If we're not able to do that, we're just sort of guessing at what to do. So what makes it look like it does? Well, I'm just going to choose the top photo here. The bottom one's a little bit different, but you would approach figuring it out the same way. In the same way as you'd approach figuring anything else out. So what do we see there? What do we see? Then we start focusing on the individual elements. The individual elements, what do I mean by that? Color is an element, value is an element, texture is an element, size is an element, direction of movement is an element. Those things are elements. So we look at what are we actually seeing? What are we seeing in the way of color, first of all? So you'll say, blue sky, that's stupid. Well, what blue is it? So here's where we go to the color wheel. So I put the color wheel up and I align it in the blue area, and we see, well, the color wheel has a darker blue, but that doesn't matter. That's value. What matters is we're looking for hue, but you see it leans a little bit more towards green. Some people would call that cerulean, but cerulean is not the only thing we see there, because we see it changes a little bit as it's going down. So we're seeing a blue, and what value is that blue? Well, then we can go to the value scale. So when we want to find the value of something, want to learn how to find the value of something, the best way to do is get a good value scale. This is an excellent one. And the reason it's excellent is because you can go outside, you can hold it up like this and close one eye, and you can compare the value on the value scale with the value you're looking at. And that tells you what you need to do in terms of value. So if we use the value scale here, and we just place it there, we say, okay, it's darker than that. You might have thought that was a really light color. If I pull it down, you see it's a little bit lighter, but it's still darker than that. If I put it here, squint a little bit, it's getting closer, but it's still darker. If I put it here, we see now it feels lighter. So it tells me down here, it's kind of in this value right here. And then if I pull it up, you can see when you squint, it's closer to this value. Now on this value scale, and the way I read values, that's between what we call 3 and 4. Those are just numbers we use to kind of tell us the value range. And so, all right, we've got 2 bits of information now. We know that it's a blue leaning towards green at a value that ranges 3 to 4. The other question we would want to ask ourselves is, what saturation is that blue? And you might say, again, stupid, it's highly saturated. Well, it might not be, but we can find out. in just a moment. So let's just focus just on the blue for the moment. Now, here's the other thing. When you're figuring out color, don't just figure it out while you're doing the painting. Figure it out before you start the painting so that you have your information, and then you can just dive right into it and not have to figure anything out as you're going along. So there's your first step. All right, let's see. Now I like these little test strips, I call them, little pieces of paper, or you can do it with your palette knife. And so what I want to do now is to find the color, the general color area that I need for working that sky. I've put out on my palette here a blue, which is actually a blue that leans a little bit more towards violet. It's ultramarine blue. You could begin with any blue, and so I see this blue. This is about the value that I found that to be, and I can hold my knife. Oh, it's a little darker than that. I mean, a little lighter than that. So I need to pull over into this value area. I like to work these value lines on my palette because then they help me to reach into the right value without having to do a whole lot of mixing as I go. So let's try that one. That is much closer. You see, it's very close to the value we're seeing right up there. So if I pull a little bit of this right over here, now this is just my little test. Now we can see, if I hold this up, we can see that it does need to lean a little bit more towards green. Well, I could use a blue-green for that, which would be a good color to use. I could really put a little bit of yellow into it, believe it or not. I think instead I've got a blue-green right here. It's the Rembrandt Viridian. I'm going to pull it right there, but you see it's much darker. So what I'll need to do there is I need to change the value of this to match this before I do any mixing. I'm getting the hue now. This is only hue and value. Well, not only hue, it's hue and value. So when I get those in the same value range, then I can bring a little bit of this over, mix it into this, and how much do I need? Did I carry it too far? How much do I need? That is pretty close to what I'm looking at right there. And then you see it gets lighter. So that tells me then, let's see about the lighter part. Does that lighter part need only white? Or when I put white in it, it got a little bit, I got a little bit chalky. So I'll reach back into the green, put a little bit more of that green in there. Is that closer? It's got it a little bit too light. So let's check this. So this will tell me where I need to be. There it is. It was that's still a little bit on the dark side. It maybe needs to be a little bit greener. So I'll just put a little bit more white into here like this, lighten this, and then try that. Will that be what I need? So you see what I'm doing there. I'm simply, this is closer. I'm simply allowing this as information to tell me what I need to do here to get that color. Now that's how you figure out the sky. If the sky was less intense, then I would need to add a complement to it. But I believe we might be able to, because it is so brilliant, we might be able to get away with what we did there for the sky. Now, I could go ahead and go ahead and put the sky in, and then figure this out and go ahead and put that in as a study. As a study, I could do that. But I would need to do the study part of all of it before I start the painting. So I like to do things like that in my sketchbook, and I usually use gouache. The previous quick tip shows you a little bit introduction into gouache, but I like to use that to do those studies. Now, so if we were doing the study, then we might do something like this. And I don't have enough paint out there, but I'm not going to do the whole painting. And some of you are going to complain about that. My purpose is not to do a painting for you, but to show you how to think the process through, so that then you can take what you learn here and do your own painting. There are plenty of painters on YouTube that will do the painting for you. All right, so I could start applying the color, and I'm just going to do a small section here, just enough to show you, and I kind of throw that blue in there and start bringing that down, bring it up in value as it comes down in this direction. Bring it up in value, and as I'm raising that value, I'm also getting a little bit of more of that blue-green that I'm seeing right there. Blend those together, which is what we see in that very, very clear sky. We blend those together, and then we have a very close interpretation to what we see there in terms of color and value of that color. So I can bring that on down. Now, if I'm working just in that little area, just say I was going to work on where I ended up. I'm working in that little area, like right in there. That, as it goes up, it tends to get a little bit darker. So I'll go over here, pull a value of that blue into that as it gets a little darker. That's why I like the value line, is because it allows me to move in this direction or in that direction in terms of value, as I need to change it when I'm mixing color. Alright, so let's see, is that, yeah. So here we go, that gets darker as it comes over. Now you notice how I'm stroking this on. That too is important for when you're doing areas that are smooth in color. If you stroke a crisscross stroke like this, rather than back and forth like this, it creates and then let it blend down like I'm doing here. It creates that, it creates a multi-directional feeling to the whole thing. If you did just one stroke across like that, it would feel all moving flat in this direction, but it gives it more depth, the color, when you use a kind of a crisscross stroke like you see me using here. Alright, so now you see as that comes down, it's not quite, as it comes over here, you see it's beginning to get a little darker because apparently the sun is over there somewhere. We can tell here because it's getting lighter as it goes in that direction. And also you can see because the where the sun is shining on top of those on those peaks there. Alright, so that's probably enough to show you now how to figure out the sky. And if you do a study in your sketchbook, you don't have to do the whole thing, but you do a study to get the feeling of what you need to do. Then when you go to do the painting, you're free to get right into that painting without having to figure things out. Okay, what do we do here? Now what are we looking at? Let's go back to that same principle of working. Observe. What do you see? What do you see the elements doing? It's the elements cause you to see what you see. So I had the test strip in my hand. I didn't even use it, did I? But what I would do, a lot of times is I will put this stroke of paint on the test strip and hold it here, and I used my palette knife instead. It works both ways. Alright, aside from that, what's happening right here? What's happening right in there? What do we see? Now, what do you see in terms of color? You might say gray. What's gray? Well, gray is a low, a barely saturated color. Sometimes gray has no color in it at all. And what's causing that, don't just reach for black, because you reach for black and white to it, yeah, that's gray, but it doesn't have any hue in it, and then you're going to have to add some hue back into it to make it belong to what you're actually seeing there, because some of this color is reflecting down in here. So what are we actually seeing there? So I put the color wheel back up. What is the hue? That's the main thing I'm trying to find out right now. What is the hue? And I can see that hue leans a little bit towards that blue still right in here, but it seems to go a little bit more towards the violet. So you see it seems to be picking up more the violet than blue, but it's very desaturated. So for that we need a complement. Now let's find the value of the darkest dark that we're seeing here first. Where is the value scale? And here, this is an analytical way of finding the value. So that darkest value that we're seeing there is, okay, if I just focus on that darkest value, this is about the value range right here. It's a what we would call a low middle value, about 7 to 6. And then we see as it moves on out, we see that value getting lighter. Not too much lighter, the gray part of it, but we do see it getting a little bit lighter, you see, as it moves on out. Main thing is now, let's get that value. So I'm going to go back in here, and that's in that value range, which is right here, in that middle value range. I'll just go ahead and pull it down on my palette right here. Now let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm in the right value range there. Now, I'm going into the complement. This is ultramarine blue, which is a blue leaning towards violet. This is the Rembrandt transparent oxide red, which is a red-orange, or an orange. It's actually more orange than red, but it's a low intensity orange. Means it's already neutralized somewhat as it comes out of the tube. So I'm going to pull some of that into this, and now what we'll find out there is it begins to go neutral. Now I pull too much in it, and it stays on that orange side. You see there? Like that. I did another quick tip where I'm doing this sort of thing. Let's see, is it too orange? Yeah, it needs more of the blue in it. So I reach back for the blue, and you see it's neutral. Now what happens is that when you have complementary colors, those are colors that are opposite on the wheel. When you have complementary colors, they subtract each other. They cancel each other out, and they cause something to get neutral. Now see about that. That's pretty close. You see I leaned it more towards blue, and that's close in value and in color. This time I think I'll use the test strip that I had in my hand and didn't show you. But here's how you use that. Just simply take your palette knife and pull some on the edge, and then you can hold it right up there, just like that. And it gives you, actually, it's, when I squint and look at it, I'm pretty close there. So what do we do with that? Well, hang on just a minute. Well, that's not all we see. We see light. You think you see white, don't you? Well, let's look and see. Do you really see white? You really going to pick up white paint and put it up here? Well, let's go with white. This is white, and you see how much darker that white is? That what we're seeing is white. Look at that. See how much darker it is? It's got a lot of that gray in it, so it will bring us to check it against this value. It's closer. Well, it's gradating it. It's closer to this. Let's see, put it right in here. Yeah, when you squint, it's closer to this value. That is an interval darker than white. And then we see a good bit of this too. So there you go. It's not white, but it's slightly white. Now, it feels a little bit like yellow, but let's just see what will happen. Do we need to put any yellow in there? Let's find out. So I'm going to take, first of all, I'll just go up into the white here. Now, I'm going to pull a little bit of this into the white and make that about an interval darker than white. And hold that up. It's a little bit lighter. Hold that up here. Now, it does feel like it needs also to have a little bit more of a warm color in it. And what does that warm color need to be? I think it needs to be orange, and here's why. Because this is blue. And usually white is going to reflect, or going to, when the light is, when there's a neutral beside a hue that's very visible, that neutral tends to, because of simultaneous contrast in our eyes, it tends to pick up the complement. So what I want to do there is to pick up a little bit, not very much, a little bit of orange. I'll just go right up here. This is a yellow orange, and it's a very light yellow orange. Let's go right up in here, just that, and well, let's pick up a little bit more right there. Now let's make that a little bit more towards orange. You could use cadmium orange for that if you wanted to. Let's make that a little bit more orange. Let's just test that out. And then I'll add maybe a little bit of this more back to it. No, that's pretty good right there as an orange. Now, before I add that into this is something else. When doing something like this, where you're adding light back in, if you're using very strong or very colors that are darker, if you add white into a mix first, white into this mix first, and then use that to mix into the color. Now let's try it. Let's mix this into this. Not much. It won't take much, and we see, that's pretty close. That's pretty close to what we need. So this is the area we need to be working in right here for that light. We don't want that to show as orange, but we want just enough of that tint of orange in there. There we go. All right, now what? Now what? We start with the dark. Look at the pattern next. What is the element you see? An element, the direction is an element. The direction this is leaning is sort of like this, and you see a pattern of this dark leaning. You see that pattern repeated because of the way they're going up the mountain. That pattern is repeated. Also, it's because of the way the angle that the sun's heading at. That pattern of dark is repeating, and you can see it's kind of unequal. So a good way to start that would be to go into the dark that we've mixed right here, and let's see, where would we start? We could start at the top, and just where we see the dark, sort of just place that feels awfully dark, I know. Just sort of place, and we could use the corner of the brush because that's ragged looking. We sort of just place that in a pattern like the pattern we're seeing, and then we make another one, and we make it the same sort of pattern. So we just do that sort of like this, the same sort of pattern. Some places it skips so we don't see any, so you have that same sort of pattern like that. Now what you see close to the sky, you don't see that very dark, so you repeat that kind of, just let your eyes guide you as to what you see, and just pick up that pattern. Always better to work dark to light when you're trying to figure out something like that. Dark to light is much easier to control. So then we'll move into the lighter color and let the brush work for us. So I'll move into this lighter color that we mixed here. I could start there, and let's just go right over in here and get that little lighter mixture right there. I can start there, right up in here. I can just push that. Whoops, that didn't work. Let's get a little bit more of that right there. Okay, push that right up next to that blue. There we go, like that. Push that, just push it up. Allow the edge, the corner of the brush. The corner of the brush works very well for doing little irregular patterns like that. So we could use the corner, just the corner of the brush, and kind of push that stuff up like that to get it started. And then we can work the darker color into it as we push it up in this direction right here, just like that, where we push just from the edge of that dark color. And if we need more dark, which I do need in this case, need to gradate that and need a little bit darker right in here, I could just gradually use the tip of the brush, not much paint in it, but just the tip of the brush, begin to develop that pattern. So with that pattern I can repeat. Now that's not the end of it. We'll exit it in just a moment. That's just to get us started. All right, now we're going to go, we'll do the same thing right here, where we repeat the pattern that we're seeing there, where this gets pushed up into that. Hang on, I need to rinse that brush off because it's carrying too much of that dark paint in it. Rinse it off and dry it really, really good. Okay, what am I doing? Oh yes, okay. All right, so we'll get this pattern. A little bit more of that darker. Get that just barely darker right there, and push it up. Using the corner of the brush, push right up into that, just like that. And that begins to develop the pattern that we're looking for. Now here, as we're coming down, we need to get that just a little bit darker as it comes down, and push that right up, one into another, just like that. Now once you have a pattern established, you see it's a very ragged pattern that we're seeing there. Once you have a pattern established, sort of like that, got that a little bit orange there, then you could go back and put the highlights on there. So we'll do that. Now to get those highlights on there, I'm going to pull down more white right here, and I'm going to add, I'm just going to go add just a little bit of this sunlight, I'm thinking, and that's watch how that works. All right. Now, I think maybe I'll just stick to this brush. I was thinking about switching to a fan brush to show you that. All right, now let's just let this accent. Just use the brush there and kind of push that and just let it kind of accent. That's the light. That's where we're seeing those very, very light specks. Just push it right up. It doesn't need to go across the whole thing. Just enough light in there for us to feel that light. And work our way up. And you can see now how that is beginning. Now this is beginning to feel like what we're looking at right there. And we can use that same little process. In fact, I think maybe they got that a little bit on the yellow side. And that is a reason, that's a reason for doing a practice study ahead of time. If something goes south, then you say, okay, I got to be careful when I do my painting that I don't get too much of that orange in there, because then that will begin to look like too much orange in there. All right, so, and then maybe a little bit. So we don't want to overdo that, really, the little light specks that are in there. But you can see now how if you build a little process like that, a process of observing what you're seeing there and placing it here, then you can paint anything you want to look, anything you're looking at. Of course, the other part of this is these trees are helping us to see that the way we see it. See, I cover up the trees and it loses its drama. So let's just do one more little step where we put throw a little bit of a tree in shadow. Now that those trees are more in silhouette, they're showing them in the painting or in the photograph is more in silhouette than we would see them if we're there. But we can do that by, we see them, they are picking up, we don't see green. You might know they're evergreens because of their shape, but they're not green. They're still falling into that sort of blue pattern. So we could pick up, and there too, I advise working this kind of thing out on location, what we call plein air. You see, when you're out in nature working directly in plein air, you see the colors and the values in a way you don't see them in photographs. If you don't have the opportunity to do that, the photograph's all you have, then I think spending time some way to work out what you see in plein air before you start working from photographs is not a bad idea. Otherwise, just know that the photograph you're looking at is going to show you the shadow areas darker than you see them, and it's going to average out some of the details. All right, so what we can do there now to show you how this contributes to what you're seeing there, show you that little relationship. We can sort of let's just do this. You see there already that very dark that I put in there, just using the pattern of the brush, what I'm looking at right in here, very dark, helps to accent what you're seeing there, helps you to see that lighter, it helps you to see this lighter, it helps to see this a little more clarity, with a little more clarity. So we are, whatever we're seeing, wherever we're seeing, is always influenced by the other things that are around it. So just studying one part of anything is not complete until you add the other parts to it. Main thing is to remember that process of studying. If you go to anything that you're looking at, if you're just focusing on what it is, you'll never be able to do anything further than guess at it. But when you look at it for what makes it appear the way it does, then you should be able, and then you know what to do with your brushes and your paints to make that happen, you should be able to paint anything you want. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.